Hello and welcome to Point of View, where we share the stories of your favorite Pittsburgh legends from their point of view. Today, in the Center for Media Innovation, we have Point Park's own Dr. Andrew Conte. Stay tuned to learn more about the true origins of the CMI and Pittsburgh Downtown Media Hub, what projects are brewing in Pittsburgh journalism scene, and what Andy has to say about the depths of his own Facebook page. Let's break it all down on POV. Thanks for streaming with us. I'm Devyn Amigh. Andy Conte is an award-winning investigative journalist from the Tribune Review. He's been a professor at Point Park for over 12 years and is currently the director for the Center of Media Innovation in the Point Park News Service. Andy has also published several books, most recently The Death of the Daily News in 2022, which highlights the closing of the city of McKeesport's last daily newspaper. Andy Conte, thank you for joining us, and thank you for making the long trek from your office to the studio.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
So, Andy.
Yes.
You have created and taken part in the development of many opportunities for Point Park students, such as the Pittsburgh Downtown Media Hub and the Center for Media Innovation. How do you hope that these spaces are utilized?
We try to be a public-facing part of the university, so the work that we're doing on campus is also work that benefits the public. And so sort of my personal mission is to make sure that the students, while they're here, like you, are getting professional experience so that when you're leaving, it's not like you're going into a newsroom for the first time and being like overwhelmed by it. Instead, you're like, oh, I've been doing this on campus for the last 3 or 4 years and I'm comfortable with it and this is what I want to do with my life. And so, like I was telling you in class the other day, like why wait forever? Like this is, like let's start doing it now.
So with those opportunities, word on the street is that you have a new project coming soon called the Next Generation Newsroom. Tell us about it.
There's always a new project in my mind. Yeah, I know. I'm like, I keep promising the staff here that we're going to slow things down, and then I keep coming up with new ideas. So, the idea is to create a teaching newsroom where we bring together student interns, so students who are active not just on Point Park, but college students who are studying journalism, along with recent graduates, so people who are just out of undergraduate, and then professionals, bringing them back to campus and giving them a chance to go to grad school and learn a different style of reporting. The focus of the newsroom is twofold. It's one, to create pathways for young people into journalism, because I hear from parents all the time who, I don't know what your parents said, but like when you visited Point Park and said like, I want to be a journalist, they're like, oh, there are no jobs and you can't do that. And then we get students who come here and they study journalism and then they go into public relations. And I know from the other side that there are professional news outlets here that are looking desperately for talented people to do journalism. And so we're trying to bridge that gap, make sure that young people when they're coming up know that there are jobs there. And at the same time, we're also trying to fill the gaps in local journalism. There are all these stories that are no longer getting told. It used to be that there were different beats that sort of were on, reporters were, even if they weren't there all the time, they were at least sort of paying attention to it. And now there are places, especially in local government, where there's just nobody. And so it's twofold. We're going to fill those gaps and create new jobs.
Yeah, so is that your hope for what it will do for the Pittsburgh community? Just kind of get people really inspired to keep doing this with journalism?
Yeah, I mean, in addition to all of that, we're planning an event that I've been calling Newsapalooza.
Newsapalooza.
Yeah, is that a good
That's
name?
Incredible,
okay,
yes.
all right. And the idea is to get the public excited about local journalism and realize that, while this used to be a very successful industry that made a lot of families very wealthy, those days are over. And now it's something that belongs to all of us. And that everyone who has a smartphone, as you know, can be a broadcaster or a publisher. And you really can reach anyone in the world with the right story. But at the same time with that comes the responsibility that, we all sort of have to be responsible for sharing good information. If we rely on news outlets to support them in some way, either with our dollars or our eyeballs and clicks. And so just to be better stewards of the news.
Yeah. Do you plan to maybe eventually take this outside of the Pittsburgh area, or is it primarily for Pittsburgh?
I say Pittsburgh, we're talking about the whole MSA. So Beaver, Newcastle, the Mon Valley, all of those news outlets. We have 27 news outlets that are part of our partnership now, and all those outlets are part of that partnership. So the vision is to do a series of events here on campus, probably on the Friday of that week, culminating in some sort of keynote event at the Playhouse, followed by a party. We should have a killer party, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then the next day doing events all across the region at all of our news partners in Westmoreland County. And they're just, the whole idea is to get people involved in local news, to get their hands on it, and to realize that what you already know, it's fun, right? Like this is a big part of what we do is, learning about new things and telling those stories to other people.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
So with telling stories, tell me about a project or accomplishment that you're the most proud of in your career. What challenges did you face? How did you learn from it?
My second book, I've written 4 books, and the second one is called The Color of Sundays, and it's about American civil rights through the prism of the National Football League. And so it's about, people know about the Negro Leagues in baseball, but not a lot of people know that the NFL kicked out all of its black players during the 1930s. And then they reintroduced, reintegrated the league the year before Major League Baseball did. And so that's part of the story. But then the Steelers ended up hiring this guy who was a reporter for the Pittsburgh Courier. His job was to find the best black college football players in America, across the country. And then he would bring them to Pittsburgh. They'd do this big party. And the Steelers started going to the party, the Rooney family, and they were like, our team's not very good. This is the only point of contention I had during the reporting was with Ambassador Rooney, Dan Rooney, when he was still alive, when he said, I said the team was bad, and he was like, no, we were only mediocre, but they had never won a playoff game and since the 1930s. And so they hired this guy and brought him in, and he helped them find all these players that I make the case that that's how they won those first 4 Super Bowls. And I use the story now to talk to audiences about why diversity is so important, why it's important to look at people for their abilities and their values rather than, their skin color or some other arbitrary thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So since you mentioned that you've written multiple books,
yeah.
What made you want to become a published author on top of everything else that you do?
When you're a writer,
yeah.
And I was a daily writer for many, many years, and you reach a point where it becomes your craft, and you're experimenting with language, and you're trying to do different things with it. And the idea of writing a book just seems so overwhelming. And so the first book that I did was about the Pittsburgh Penguins, and they were in the Civic Arena, and they were trying to get this new arena. And part of the deal was they wanted to build a casino right next to the arena. And I covered that whole process. And the whole time, the Penguins president, this guy David Morehouse, would say to me, "Oh, this is a book. You should write a book." And I was like, I don't know. I just didn't think I could do it. And then they got the new arena. It was in very dramatic fashion. And then they won the Stanley Cup. And I was like, oh, that was a book. I should have done a book, right? And then so I hurried up and did it, and it came out, and it was a rewarding experience. Nobody had really written a book about the Penguins before, and particularly about that period in time. So the book came out in October, and it immediately became a bestseller. And my publisher called after 2 weeks, and they were like, "We got some great news. Your book's a bestseller. You've sold these books, but the bad news is we've sold out of books." And they didn't have any more. They were like,
no.
Yeah, they're like, it's going to take 2 more weeks to get more books.
Yeah.
And so, it was a good problem to have.
Definitely a good problem to have.
Yeah. And it was also one of those things where it was hard to believe that the book was everywhere. One night I did an interview with a radio station in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, and I was like, I wonder if they can get the book there. And I looked it up, and the local bookstore, they had the book. So
wow.
It was pretty fun. Yeah.
What was your writing process like? Because you've written multiple books besides just that, and I know that you just came out with one last year, The Death of the Daily News. What's the writing process like for you? How do you juggle that on top of everything else?
Yeah, so when I've been at my best with the writing, it is something I do in the early morning. I get up at 4:30 or 5 in the morning, and I write before I come to work. At least I did when I was at the Tribune Review, and I got into this habit where I would was kind of a neat trick where if I would look at my notes before I went to bed and think about what I wanted to write about in the next morning, I would already be thinking about the story when I woke up. So I would wake up early and the words would already be flowing, and I would grab a cup of coffee and sit down, and the house would be quiet, and I would just start writing, and I would keep going. And sometimes I was like, it's the only time I've ever had that when I was in my career where I was like in a flow where just like everything else faded away and the words would just come, and I would write until I started hearing, my kids started waking up and my wife, and that for me was like one of the hardest things, to listen to the house wake up, because it was sort of like my quiet time.
Mm-hmm. You're always just like mentally writing, like it's just always there, even in your dreams.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, it really, it's a neat trick. Like you should try it. It's your sort of dream state. You're already sort of writing.
Just a little dream, Andy.
Yeah.
He's writing, and he wakes up and he puts it on paper.
It was so great, and I didn't remember any of it. Yeah, it does work. Yeah.
Okay. So we talked about this in your class. So artificial intelligence, it's been a huge thing. It's up and coming. It's new. As it becomes more integrated into our daily lives, things like ChatGPT, do you see AI becoming a part of the journalism industry?
Yes, I do. I think it's, and a lot of people are apprehensive about what AI is going to do and the people it's going to replace. And I think that's a legitimate fear.
Yeah.
But it also puts more onus on people to do more critical thinking. And I think that's going to be the challenge for journalism and for lots of other industries, is to define what it means. What's the human part of this role? And to that extent, so if we can use the computers to do the stuff that is really simple and is kind of rote and that we shouldn't have been doing anyway, great. And then if that frees up people to do more critical thinking skills, like original storytelling, original interviewing, a computer's not going to replace what you're doing right now.
So there was a report from Every Pixel Journal that claims that over 15 billion AI images have been created alone in 2023. And that's more photographs that were taken in the first 150 years of photographic history. What kind of effects do you think that these images will have on media?
Yeah, I mean, it's a challenge because it's getting to the point where you don't know what's real and what's not real. And I think that's going to be the big challenge going forward, not just for still images, but also for video and audio. We know that, like I did say, you wouldn't be replaced, but I think like if your image and your voice could be replicated, right? So I do think that's a concern, particularly for young people going into the industry. But what can't be replicated is the thinking you're putting into asking these questions, and
Do you think that this has created a further distrust between the audiences and media, or do you think that it could better things?
I think in some ways, I mean, I tend to be a total optimist on these things anyway. But I think that if it helps people draw a line between sort of the media, I think all these people have this idea of like concerns about the media, and people don't like that with lots of good reason. But then they love the local journalists when they meet them, and so if it reinforces this idea that people need to support journalists that they see in the person and trust and know as part of their community, then it could be a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, what is your favorite failure or mistake from your career, and how did you learn from it? I feel like you always have these really crazy stories to tell in class. Anybody who sat down with you would know you can just pull something out of your pocket and be like, yeah, this happened to me once. You always just have like these really crazy stories. So what's one of your favorites?
Of a failure.
Failure, just something that's happened.
I guess I try to black out the failures, but I don't know. Well, I will say, sometimes the little things are really frustrating, and it's when you're a daily news reporter, I literally would forget, like if I wrote a story and then 2 or 3 days later somebody asked me, I would be like, I don't remember what I did, But the errors that you make along the way are ones that stick with you for forever. And one time I did a story about these the state representatives in Pennsylvania, and they had something, it was like walking around money, where they would get like extra money that they could use in their district for any discretionary purpose. And I had written a story, and one of the members had taken a bunch of airplane trips or something like that. And I wrote the story, and it turned out that unbeknownst to me, there were 2 representatives with the exact same name. Oh, and I had the wrong one, wrong district, and the the person who was outed, the wrong one, called my editor and was like, well, how can this happen? This is ridiculous, blah blah blah. And I just, it's like one of those things that you never forget. Like, oh, make sure that
Oops.
check the spelling, check the name, check the district, make sure it's the right person. Yeah.
And then on that topic, what's the wildest thing that's ever happened to you during an interview or during one of your assignments?
So I worked, my first newspaper was in South Florida, and the newspaper, there was a guy there who was selling Florida citrus to the Chinese, and my newspaper was like, we're going to send you to China. And so they sent me to China for 3 weeks with this guy.
Oh my gosh.
And yeah, it was an incredible experience. And also, it turned out he had been a defense intelligence officer earlier in his life. And so I was always questioning sort of like, are we just here to sell citrus, or is there something else going on? And it was a really fascinating experience. That was back in the days when local newspapers had money. And I remember our newspaper, they would show us that 90% of the homes took the newspaper, and it was like, like a community of retirees. Everybody took the paper. The newspaper had this beautiful new office, and all of that is gone. I was talking with some people from down there recently, and like that whole newsroom is gone. And yeah, and like, I mean, the newspaper's still there, but they would never ever, like, they wouldn't even send somebody that, like most newspapers wouldn't send anybody to another neighborhood, right? Like they're not going to send you across town, let alone to China. Yeah.
I feel like every time I sit down with you, I learn something new.
Okay.
Like you always just have these new things to bring to the table. It's very, very interesting.
I mean, that is the journalist life, though.
Yeah.
That and that's why I'm so excited about sharing it with young people. Is that we hear all the stuff, that horrible stuff about people say, you can't have a career in journalism, but the reality is, like, you have so many interesting experiences, and you're front row seats for the first draft of history every day.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, it's cool.
Well, that was the last question that I had for you before we move on to our next segment.
Oh, all right.
Any closing thoughts before we head into your Facebook page?
No, I'm just excited to, I'm so proud of you and all of our students, and taking on these projects.
Absolutely.
And so thank you.
Thank you. So this segment is called Photo of You, where we scour the internet and our guest social media pages with a hope to answer what was going on from their point of view in that moment. Are you ready, Andy?
Okay, let's do it.
Okay. All the pictures that we're about to show you are from your personal Facebook page.
Okay. That's not me.
Over there.
Oh, right. Yeah. That's a good one.
This is one that our team has dubbed Gray Encroaching.
Yeah.
So what was happening in this picture?
Yeah, I was so proud of my hair in that photo. Like, it was really it was like a great hair day, and
you
I had never had.
You have
always
thank
had
you.
Great
hair.
Thanks for saying that. I at that point I had never had long hair before, and I had just let it grow. And that was at we were doing an event at our church, and it was like a church dinner, and I was just there, and I think we had some international journalists visiting or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I remember the hair from the photo.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. That's not why I posted it to Facebook, but
Why did you post it to Facebook?
Because we were doing something cool at our church. It was for the people.
So for the next one, we call this one Birthday Extravaganza.
Yeah.
I love the hat.
Yeah, so we had at the Tribune Review, that was one of the things we did. We had this hat that got passed around the newsroom, and there's a reporter, Selena Zito, who now writes for the Washington Examiner and the New York Post and sometimes CNN. She made a big deal on everybody's birthday and would bring in a cake for everybody, each person, and you got to wear the hat, and it was a big deal.
So that was on your birthday?
That was my birthday.
You got to wear the hat, you got the cake,
yeah.
Deal?
Yeah,
awesome.
Right.
Was the hat like homemade? Did she buy it? Like,
it was like from a store, but I think it plays a song. It might have lit up.
It plays a song.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, it was like a whole thing. Yeah.
Okay, for photo number 3, we have Tuba Luba or Band Geek.
Oh, Tuba Luba. Yeah, it's not a tuba. That's a trombone. Get to know your brass instruments. That's it's totally different.
I didn't come up with the name.
Yeah, I was. Yeah, fortunately, Facebook doesn't go all the way back to my high school days, because there'd be a lot more photos like that. But yeah, I played the trombone. I was good too.
You were in band?
I had a big solo, where I stood out in the middle of the field and all the majorettes danced around me, but it didn't get me any dates though. So it was a problem.
Unfortunate.
Yeah.
So for another one, we have Demon Alien Americana.
Oh wow, yeah. That was I think that was my 40th birthday, and it's at Banjo Night over at the Elks Club on the North Shore. And Selena, who I told you about the birthdays, she told me that we were going to interview Mitt Romney when he was running for president.
Yeah.
And so I was all amped up for this interview, and instead we got there and it was a surprise birthday party for me. So
that's amazing.
Yeah,
Clearly she's all about birthdays.
Right, yeah.
Making sure everyone feels special on their special day.
Yeah.
All right, and then I believe this is our last photo we have here. This is 0030.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Andy Conte makes you think.
Makes you think.
Yeah. So the Tribune Review put billboards out all across the region with different reporters' names with different slogans underneath it.
Wow.
And that one was out going toward Oakland. And yeah, it was fun. There was a later one. They did a second series where my photo was actually on a billboard too.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah.
Did you get to pick the catchphrase that was on there? Or
No,
did they just come up with it?
I think they were all like makes you think or something
Makes
like
you
that.
think.
Yeah.
Okay, they all
But
were.
and the funny thing though was that some of the city officials, I was covering City Hall at that point, and they had to drive past the billboard every day, and so they would come in and like, oh, I saw your billboard again. I'm so sick and tired of you and the way you make me think. You know, because it was like it's like a love-hate relationship when you're covering people. So.
Understandable.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
All right, well, that's all that we have for the photos, and that's all the questions that I have. Once again, opportunity for closing thoughts.
Well, I wish there were so many more photos. We could have done.
I wish too. We could have done a lot more.
Yeah, it was fun.
We definitely found some other ones that we should have pulled up on there, but.
That's a fun segment. Thanks.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Andy Conte is the founding director for the Center of Media Innovation, which houses our show, and the manager of the Point Park News Service. We look forward to seeing the Pittsburgh Media Partnership and the Next Gen Newsroom in action. And thank you so much for streaming with us. Our show is produced here at the CMI with thanks from our partners at UView Television and the Point Park News Service. I'm Devyn Amigh, and we hope to see you next time on POV.